Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, everyone. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. So glad you're here. I hope this finds you healthy, safe. There are events unfolding in the world. The struggle for the ego, power, economic challenges, just the avarice of what we can loosely call world leaders. I don't know. There's not much leadership on display across the world, this planet, of late. That's for certain. There's a great deal to lament. It makes me profoundly sad. In a strange way, it keeps me pushing forth in my practice and in my desire to speak on the practice, to hopefully, if nothing else, provide some respite against the backdrop of intense greed and anger, manipulation. We hear it spewing forth from our media, our social media, our whatever types of media, and certainly our quote-unquote leadership, which I understand why Putin is doing what he's doing. I understand why. It's all based on anger and greed. And without sinking into depression by just seeing the depravity at work across the planet, in all areas, north and south of the hemisphere, east, west. Let us try to focus our energies and amass our energies in a positive, constructive, introspective, and influential way, that we might, at very least, bolster the honor and dignity of life, human life, all life, from the trees and insects to the animal kingdom to one another. Let's not fall into a replication or a mirroring of the examples that are being constantly pushed at us through media and these fake leaderships, which is all about their own gain, their own egos. Let us not be influenced by that path. Let us keep our practice and our study first in our lives. Let us maintain and walk tall in our knowledge, in our understanding, in our flow with the great universal truth of life and its many, many amazing and glorious concepts, free of these petty, egotistical, juvenile games that end up taking so many lives and causing so much suffering. It's not the way to go. And it will only be slowed down and eventually overcome by our strength of character. We must continue to believe that. We must continue to build that. And if there's any exegesis, any inspiration, any motive to risk our security by telling others how to do as we are doing, then simply look at the dark cloud of leadership, quote unquote, in today's world. If that doesn't motivate you, I don't know what else will. What small risk I take in talking to you every day, as much as I can, on these teachings of dignity, value, and the merits, the rewards of living life fully. All of these efforts are a groundswell into the psychology and the influence of we sentient beings. Let's let that ripple out. We'll know we've succeeded when leaderships and their constructs and structures change, when they're influenced. And believe me, they are influenced. It may not seem so, but ask yourself how we haven't entered into another world war yet. The only thing keeping us from utter destruction and violence of that nature, that avarice, that greed, that ego for omnipotence, is our strong resolve. So obviously we need to build it more and more. All right, back to the Onko Kikigaki. We're almost done with it, and then we'll have a talk, or several, on the structures of 3,000 realms. I have a whole new document here of scholarship on that. I've read some of it, and it is exciting. But before we get to it, let us complete our study of the Onko Kikigaki. Nico continues, quote, untainted by worldly dharmas, like the lotus blossom in the water, they emerge from out of the earth, end quote. You can probably tell what chapter this is referring in the Lotus Sutra. It's about the bodhisattvas emerging from the earth. I've talked about this when I did the Lotus lectures. We went over it several times. I've talked about it when Nichiren's brought it up in his Go show. This is a reference to future generations, right? Growing from the earth. The earth as this great mother of consciousness, of our instantiation and manifestation, right? Were it not for the earth, we would not exist. So, these bodhisattvas emerging from the earth are a statement in the Lotus Sutra speaking of the future generations. Nico goes on, our teacher said, quote, untainted by worldly dharmas, end quote, means utterly uncorrupted by greedy desires, etc. How relevant is that for us today? To illustrate, though the lotus blossom grows in the water, it is not stained by the mud. This lotus blossom is a symbol for the bodhisattvas who emerged from out of the earth. Earth means the great earth that is the Dharma nature. So, transcending this physical samsaric idea of this earth as this planet is the energy that has manifested over billions of years to accomplish this thing we call planet Earth, from which we evolve and manifest, right? So the Dharma, again, sends us all the way back through time to the original instantiation energies that would eventually develop into this earth and then this species, humans, right? The meaning here is that practitioners of the Lotus Sutra are like the lotus, not being stained by the muddy waters. They simply make the spread of the soul great matter, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, their basis. So this is a profound statement of, I get questions occasionally, why? Why am I here? Right? We've heard this in movies and textbooks and sonnets. What am I doing here? What am I living for? Why life? Why is this in any way necessitated? It's a depressing thought, but it's also a question that is a searching question. Where is the value in my life? Of what value is me being here? We ask it in many, many ways of ourselves, as well as in a general kind of puff to the universe. Why the hell am I here? What am I doing here? Right? And so this is the answer. The reason, the inspiration, the purpose, the actual function of your life is enlightenment, is to experience this process in its amazing splendor and to hold it in dignity, in value, to express it to all the other forces in the universe and in the species, in other human minds, in samsara, as the preeminent reason to experience this life. This life is to experience this life fully to its maximal potential and to discard, push away, quell, defeat, pick an adjective, to get rid of the negative contexts of creation, the negative contexts, the negative energies, if you will, that manifest as I overused word obstacles, but obstacles to what? To this manifestation of value, an incredible, amazing, honored existence, the total process of this magnificent universe and our places within it as conscious entities to witness with amazement and appreciation life. Anything that's counter to that is not only destructive, but it's counter to life. I've used the word affirming and unaffirming in the past, right? This is a dividing line of our Buddha practice versus our egotistical samsaric practice. There is life-affirming acts, and there is life-unaffirming act. I'm not trying to say that only Buddhists are life-affirming. But what I am saying is our practice of Buddhism is completely located in the life-affirming consciousness. This is why it's so important that we work diligently to maintain that mental energy, and as we course through the world, to influence others who, many of whom are not Buddhist, but who can also make life-affirming acts. And if we can then accelerate and expand their actions in a life-affirming way through teaching them, through guiding them, through helping them discover the Buddhist way, the Buddha way, the Bodhisattva way, they will be the most receptive and garner the greatest rewards because they're already acting in life-affirming ways, albeit struggling in a world that seems determined to be life-unaffirming. It's just because those voices are louder and they're weaponized, which can be very intimidating, yeah? Untainted by worldly dharmas means that even if one should be granted fiefs and official rank by the ruler of the nation and his great ministers, right, ego, one does not become corrupted by it. Rather than be drunk with power, when those positions are made available to you and I, we see them as opportunities to influence greater numbers. This follows. This is why we're here. Right? Makes sense? Not accepting offerings from those who slander the Dharma is also called untainted by worldly dharmas. Right? Anything that leads to your corruption, that leads to flattery of your ego, or expands your power from a standpoint of manipulation, world of anger, right? Well, if you'll do this and fool this many people, look at the worldly riches I will give you. Get lost. My worldly riches are dignity, value of life, joy, love. A bigger car and a yacht, unless I use them to promote this teaching and get more and more people to practice Buddhism, those tools are not in service of life-affirming behavior. If they are in service of big drunk, drug-filled parties and sex and that kind of power, that's not really a power. That's a delusion of power. That's destructive. That's life unaffirming. In that case, I don't want those things. If those are the conditions of having those things, be gone. We need more of that kind of thinking in our, quote, leadership, don't we? The lotus will not grow apart from the water. The water indicates Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. The Buddha's original disciples are like the lotus blossoms. They are bodhisattvas who, since the remotest past, have upheld the original teaching. The original core dignity of what life, of which humanity is just a tiny little part. Remember, life is the universe. We are the observers. Yeah, our little numbers here on this little blue planet, amongst this immensity that we can't even fathom. We are the documenters, the experiencers, the witnesses of this grandeur. Don't take that position lightly. Talk about power. This is the meaning of the lotus blossom in the water. Again, the water indicates our strength, our resolve, our commitment, our stalwart confidence as practitioners. The lotus blossom is the wonderful dharma of the original cause and original effect. We've already talked about that. See videos. In the water of resolve and confidence, the lotus blossom of the wonderful dharma grows. Earth indicates the mind ground of us ordinary beings, our physical reality. Right? The apparatus I've been talking about. That's earth. The mind is emergent, like the lotus blossom, from the earth. To emerge from out of means that at the time when this teaching is spread far and wide, all living beings throughout Jambudvipa will become practitioners of the Lotus Sutra. That's a huge vision, isn't it? The pre-Lotus Sutra teachings are like lands of rubble. How often has Nichiren been that direct? But this is Nichiren's message. There's been this long-standing argument for thousands of years of competing avarice, competing political motivations to establish one teaching as superior to another. Well, certainly the teachings are built upon each other to a crescendo and to an actualization of the ultimate teaching in the Lotus. We can read that throughout the sutras themselves. The introductory chapters to the Lotus Sutra say it specifically. All teachings I have before teached, now teach, and will ever teach, this is the teaching. This is the core. This is the goal. None will surpass this teaching. This is what it's been all about. It's Shakyamuni's own words. So for others to say, yeah, but, right? You're dealing with populations of illiteracy. And I don't mean stupid. I mean people just don't know how to read or write. We're not living in those times anymore. So for us, it's obvious which teaching is the supreme teaching of all of Shakyamuni's teachings. We can read it in the very teachings. So these political agendas of those who want to say one is more important than another falls apart with just the slightest bit of study. Nichiren points this out ad nauseum throughout all of his Go shows, right? The pre-Lotus Sutra teachings are like lands of rubble. This is a quote from the Lotus. Our teacher said, again, this is Nico talking about Nichiren, Chuan 3 of the Lotus Sutra reads, quote, it is as though they came from a land where hunger prevails and at once encountered a great king's feast, end quote. Chuan 6 reads, this, my land, is secure and at peace, constantly filled with gods and humans. My pure land is indestructible, end quote. The intent of these passages from both chapters is that the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings are like a land where one must journey through rubble. To mistakenly think that such a place is one's own country or the capital city comes about because of delusion. This is indicating those teachers who would have you invest your Buddhahood in lesser teachings, earlier teachings. Not lesser because Shakyamuni didn't know what he's talking about, but because you're reading steps in the process on the way to attaining the wisdom of the Lotus Sutra. And to practice those earlier practices won't get you to the goal. You're missing the mark. You're deluded into thinking that a lesser teaching will give you the results you're actually looking for, because Buddhahood is right here, right now. Because the beings had all dwelt in such a country for 42 years, indicating the earlier teachings leading up to the Lotus Sutra, they thought it was their original land. Our true country is the Lotus Sutra. Thus, the chapter on, quote, belief and understanding states, quote, by chance he returned to his own country, end quote. The place where one has received the seed of Buddhahood is the remotest past, is variously called one's own country, the Pure Land, or the Great King's Feast. The mind ground that receives the seed of Buddhahood is precisely the country of accepting, holding, believing, and understanding. Nichiren's disciples must not be cowards. So, just to complete the thought on that earlier statement, this once again refers to the origination of the universe itself. That the seed in that origination of perceiving it fully awake, enlightened to this magnificent process, has been there from the moment it began. This is the seed of Buddhahood. And the expedient means, the stories that say things like returning to his own country, or the Pure Land, or the Great King's Feast, are all euphemisms, metaphors meant to indicate this original state, this foundational energy from which we can experience consciously the entirety of its construct, our true nature, Buddha. Yeah? Nichiren's disciples must not be cowards, our teacher said. This means that in time of debate, one should not heed even Shakyamuni of the provisional teachings or of the trace teachings of the Lotus Sutra. If one is a coward, he will start to think, quote, am I really not to heed even Shakyamuni? But if one should not heed even Shakyamuni, then how could one heed bodhisattvas from the stage of virtual enlightenment on down? So this is to say that we will meet other Buddhist practitioners who do not practice the Lotus Sutra, and they will try to beat us down, create doubt. This is what Nichiren is concerned about, because in his time there's all these different schools of Buddhism that are politically motivated, financially motivated, and they will try to stop the expansion of Lotus Sutra Buddhism because it's so powerful, because it's so true. They can't manipulate it. They can only shut it down. And this is why Nichiren says, if you understand what it is you're practicing, you need to hold it supreme, because others, even other Buddhists of lesser teachings, will try to convince you how wrong you are. And if you start to question the Lotus and your practice because of these negative influences, then you're getting corrupted. You can't allow that to happen. Even less could one heed those who slander the Dharma. When I read this, I have to be careful, because when I read this, I feel like sometimes it's my personal mission to go and destroy all of these other corruptors and call them out. But I also don't want to be guilty of creating collisions and war where I want to invest the bulk of my time on this teaching, this dignity, this maximal potential of life. and convince you of the same. Because you should live your life fully, without regret, without fear. Right? That's what motivates my practice. But when somebody challenges me, when somebody throws the rhetoric, even in studies of Nichiren, that obviously don't belong, that are obviously completely wrong, then it's part of my responsibility not to cower, but to point it out. That's wrong. That has no place here. That's motivated by ego, avarice, something else. And then I let it go. But I flag it because we're talking about it. And I want you to know that even in our midst, those who would call themselves followers of Nichiren, because of cultural bias, because of nasty intent, most likely just ignorance, might use a word or a term that completely contradicts the Lotus Sutra, Nichiren's doctrine, Shakyamuni himself, in other words, all of Buddhism. And it slips in there, like a little piece of dirt under a, well, how many of us now, well, vinyl is getting more popular with record players, Every time you want to play a vinyl record, you've got to use a special sweeper to get into the grooves without scratching the grooves, because the scratches are the sound, the music, right? So we have to be very careful to keep our grooves clean. And here comes a little dust particle, and boop, and the needle bumps over it, and we get some noise or a little jumping of a track because of that little piece of dust. We have to clean that dust out of there if we're to hear the music fully, properly, continuously, right? Sending forth the great voice of Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, one should counter the various sutras and sects. This is the meaning of the sutra passage, quote, skillful in answering difficult questions. Their hearts were without fear. Oh, this week has been the land of robocalls. Apologies. Among practitioners of the Lotus Sutra, there are those like water and those like fire, quote unquote. Among those who have confidence and resolve and determination in this sutra, there are differences like those of fire and water. Practitioners like fire are many, while those like water are few. Like fire means that when they hear the teaching of this sutra, their resolve flares up like a flame. Although they believe, thinking the teaching most noble and superior, their resolve is soon extinguished. Fires burn out. At the time, theirs seems like remarkable faith or strength or determination. But the lamp of such belief easily goes out. As for the practitioners who are like water, water flows day and night without retreating, never ceasing even in the slightest. One who believes in the Lotus Sutra in this way is called a practitioner like water. There's the lesson right there. Uncorruptibility. A woman, Myo and Shakyamuni, are one essence. There's an interesting statement. Our teacher says, a woman gives birth to a child. The child she has born will in turn bear another child. In this way, though many repetitions countless children, or through many repetitions, countless children will be born. Right? Among them, there will be good children, wicked children, children who are upright and handsome, and ugly children. There will be children of short stature, and others who are tall, as well as male children and female children. Stating the obvious, right? The meaning here is that from the single character myo, all dharmas are produced. From hell, the realm of hungry ghosts, and all the way up to the Buddha realm. There are provisional teachings and true teachings. There is good and there is evil. The character myo gives birth to all the dharmas. Why? Because this is, again, going back to the instantiation of the universe. Everything extant in the universe comes from the same source. Whether it behaves or misbehaves, whether it's a life-giving planet like Earth or a burning star, which is also life-giving, right? There's a fundamental and there's the instantiations of every sort from it. All potential. We've talked about this before. This quiescent energy of all potential. When it explodes into manifestation, then all that potential has to be expressed. So we have constant duality in this samsaric reality, but we must focus ourselves on the positive aspect. Otherwise, the whole universe goes out of balance in a way, don't you think? If everyone just slips into the negative aspect, then, like fire, it will burn out. There won't be anything. And the only thing we will experience, for sure, is suffering, anxiety, stress, death. But if we conduct our minds, the emergent property from all of that, from everything, as a sort of a parent, a guiding, embracing force of all of this potential manifestation, then we can lock into the life-affirming, positive. We can shift the balance in a nurturing, life-affirming way. It is that large. The meaning here is that from the single character myo, all dharmas are produced from hell, realm of hungry ghosts, all of the realms, right? 10 worlds in the 10 worlds, on and on and on. There are provisional teachings and true teachings. There are good and there is evil. The character myo gives birth to all the dharmas. Again, from the body of the single Buddha Shakyamuni, all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are produced. I've talked about this throughout many, many videos, that all of these other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, their expedient means, their naming conventions, their actions, their stories are all about mental attitudes, mental conditionings, mental ways of seeing. They are, as is said often in the translations, emanations of Shakyamuni. They're not actual Buddhas. They're mental concepts. There is only one, Shakyamuni Buddha. But what he realized, the Buddha-ness that he realized in his samsaric life, is our example of our own realization of Buddha. And so all of these stories have examples of instantiations of Buddha-ness. So to worship or to follow some other Buddha is to be misled by a dream. Because those are personages. They're conceptualizations of ways of the mind. And they're on this mandala. That's why Nichiren created it the way he created it. In the Lotus Sutra, these other emanations are discussed at length to encapsulate ideas of our enlightenment. And there they are on that mandala. But what's in the middle? What's the treasure tower? It's you. Amida, Yakushi, Dainichi, and the others are all like the 10,000 reflections on the 10,000 bodies of water of the single moon that is Shakyamuni. This being the case, there is no dissimilarity whatsoever between a woman, Myo, and Shakyamuni. Right, Tammy? Right? Right, Georgina? All of you. The great teacher Miao Chanjan states, quote, Myo is precisely the 3,000 realms, and the 3,000 realms are precisely Ho. This is the meaning of the passage from the Devadatta chapter, quote, there was a single precious jewel whose value was equal to the trichiliocosm. Trichiliocosm. That's a weird word. I'll never... The trichiliocosm basically is the 3,000 realms. This is why when we're done with this, one more page about here, our next videos will be on those 3,000 realms from Tendai's initial dissection of them. And it's going to be very straightforward, not mystical at all. You'll see. Quote, arrive without differing thoughts at a pure land of Vulture Peak. I think you can already guess, just from what we've been doing, what this statement is about. How are we doing time-wise? It's getting long, but I want to finish this document. So we might go a little bit long. Maybe you'll need to download the audio podcast so you can listen to this in its entirety, or just come back to the video. That's okay. But for myself, I really want to finish this document so we can move on to others. Our teacher said, Nichiren, differing thoughts, quote unquote, indicates disbelief. Because when we entertain many thoughts about the same thing, what we're experiencing is doubt. And we're shifting in our mind, not knowing where to land. And you must know where to land. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. That's your landing. That's where your maximal value, dignity, expression, potential, that's where it is. Getting really dry mouth today. When thoughts of disbelief arise in our minds, we should at once dwell in the mind of confidence, of resolve, of Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. That's a lesson for today, if you will. Whenever you feel doubt, whenever you're not sure what to do, let alone how to practice, chant. Chant it in your mind. Envision your mandala in front of you. Close your eyes if you have to. See that mandala. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Right? If you're outside and you have one of those shaky, rattly moments, look up in the sky. Look at the clouds. Look at the magnificence around you. The bird in a tree, a hawk, a lake, whatever is around you in nature that can inspire you, and chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. And you'll return to your center. The point is that one should not make the mind of disbelief one's teacher. Right? Don't buy into your doubts. That just keeps leading you in circles all over the place. But rather, take the mind of resolve as one's teacher. Keep returning your mind to Namo Myoho Renge Kyo until the doubt fades. It just goes or blows apart. And then go on experiencing life fully. With a pure mind and believing reverence, one should cultivate the practice of the Lotus Sutra. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. That's our practice of the Lotus, right? Thus, in the phrase, quote, is able to uphold this sutra, end quote, or, quote, is able to preach this sutra, end quote, the Buddha stressed the words, quote, is able to, end quote. Herein lies Vulture Peak. In that very act, you are like that entire ceremony in the sky of the Lotus Sutra, the sermon in the sky, where you, Buddha, and the many treasures are united, floating on a lotus blossom pad in the air, looking upon all existence. What a visual. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Rarefied air, right? The four kinds of lands exist in the single thought moment. All are the land of eternal, tranquil light. Eternal, tranquil light. Think of that if you're a physicist or a cosmologist or an astrophysicist or anyone who studies the universe. The eternally tranquil light. Right? The formation of the universe is a brilliant, super hot, super active light. In fact, there's no mass. And as the universe grows and we get more and more black holes where light cannot escape, at its edge, what we see is photons, just like everything. It's all about light, but physical light, not mythical light. The transfer document for the last age, quote unquote, our teacher said, last age means the fifth 500 years that begin the final Dharma age. The transfer document is Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Now, I haven't heard it said that directly, but think about the implication of that. And it's actually in concert with everything Shakyamuni's ever taught, certainly in the Lotus Sutra and in Nichiren's dialogues and doctrines. Shakyamuni in the Lotus Sutra explained to you and I how to instantiate the very thing he did, Buddha. The Lotus Sutra, which is the expedient means for explaining Myoho Renge Kyo, and Nichiren gets, I get it. And now we all practice this practice of Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, along with study, so that we can continue to deepen our resolve, our confidence that this is Buddhahood in our grasp. That teaching, the Lotus Sutra, and our practice of Namo Myoho Renge Kyo is the actual transfer of Shakyamuni Buddha to you and I. Here's the keys. Here's the deed. It's yours. Have it. Do it. That's amazing. You don't have to go through some organization. You don't have to go through some group to qualify. Shakyamuni's already guaranteed you're qualified. He's guaranteed that everything and everyone is qualified. It simply requires doing. Commit. Take the keys. Frame the document. Use it. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Now you have it. This is the transfer document. There's a lot of talk about transfer documents in different sects that gives them some kind of authority. You're the only authority here. You have the authority to make your mind Buddha. Only you. No one can take it away from you. No one can give it to you. This is yours. A document that is handed down as proof of inheritance. There are two meanings in this transfer. One is the destination of successorship. The other is the bestowal of wealth. The designation of successorship means that Shakyamuni named as his heirs the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra. The passage of proof states, quote, on and on, desiring to make all beings equal to me. We chant that every time we recite Gangyo. Without difference, end quote. As for the transfer of wealth, Shakyamuni also passed on to the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra his wisdom and the virtues he had obtained by observing the precepts. The passage of proof states, quote, we have obtained for ourselves the supreme jewel cluster without seeking it, end quote. Thus, the 5 characters of the Daimoku constitute a transfer document. Myoho Renge Kyo. And that's the end of this translation. The end of the Onko Kikigaki. Well, I have to say, and thank you for staying with me here, whether or not the academic community and the community of scholars both within Buddhism and outside Buddhism, in universities and sects and corporations, deemed this translation to be an authentic translation, authentic documentation by Nico with 1K, whether they date this document as having existed or being created at the time of Nichiren, which certainly that's the nature of the document, or if it was something created as some sort of a summary by a senior monk in later centuries, which when it appeared around the 1400s would have been a couple hundred years after Nichiren's demise. I think the most important aspect of this document is the method by which it surmises Nichiren's Gosho, Nichiren's thoughts, Nichiren's teachings in a very efficacious manner. And I have to say, whether they can argue about that all day long, but again, Shakyamuni told us, study all the scholarship of Buddhism. So that's what we're doing. My own experience, and yours, if you've gone through all the Gosho videos we have on this channel, and again, I say there's more. I have some from the Nichiren Shu project on Buddhism. And they have their own cultural biases and stuff, and they review a lot of the same Gosho, some by different name or some not included in the Gosho Zenshu. And we're going to get into those too. And I think I may identify them in a separate playlist just so we can be clear as to where this information comes from. But even having studied those, this document rings so true with everything we know about Nichiren's doctrine. So the question of who exactly is the author and when it was authored, I find as secondary. Does this information track? And to me, it certainly does. In fact, it tracks so well that it puts a grin on my face that somebody had the wherewithal, the intelligence to conceptualize in less words these critical meanings of sentences that we would otherwise read in the Lotus Sutra as, here we go again with this story or this fanciful, right? Because to our way of thinking, we're much more direct about ideas. And it's certainly plausible that Nichiren, speaking to his closest students, would dispense with a lot of flowery language around a concept and just get right to the matter. Because he was concerned that these 6 individuals would deeply understand his perspective on the Lotus Sutra, his doctrine. And this document certainly reflects that kind of an activity. So that's my opinion. And I think that's all we need to get out of this document, is an elucidation and a furthering of what we all already understand, or maybe we didn't fully understand, of Nichiren's doctrine. So thank you for listening along, taking notes, your comments, your emails. They're all tremendous. And again, I want to make sure you guys know how proud I am of your dedication to your practice. That means everything. And you don't have to believe me, I just read it. Right? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. Thanks for those who are able to support this channel. That's invaluable to all of us. And don't forget, this was a long one today, so you may want to download the audio from Podbean or wherever you get your podcast, the Buddhahood podcast. And I can't wait to get started again on another round of 3,000 Realms. A very lacking coverage all over the world and on the internet of what that actually means. So I don't want to turn away any opportunity to once again investigate that concept. I think it's crucially important for us to understand. And with that, I will let you go. Bye for now. See you in the next one. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Take care of your health. Be kind.